Banter is banter.
on YouTube. I worked at my last company for 5.5 years, and the majority of people I worked with, I only saw from the neck up. So I have no concept of how tall or short or, what anybody looked like. I mean, essentially, I could have been working with like the heads in a jar from Futurama if depending upon how their cameras angled. So yeah,
Hmm.
it's just weird to have so many people have such an impact on your life that directly that you never meet. And I'm not sure that I would, because for me, not being able to necessarily recognize faces, I could look at somebody online for 5.5 years, but that doesn't mean that I'm going to recognize them out in the real world. So I could walk by some of these people and not ever know. It's just odd.
Yeah. So if all you ever saw was faces and you're fairly face blind, you may not have ever actually worked with anyone. You might have just been talking to AIs this entire time.
Well,
You could have been in an episode of Black Mirror.
I mean, I could, so truthfully, if anybody's going to stress me out, it's going to be me. So that would track. And I did have those imaginary friends. I had Carissa, I had my like imaginary friends, but then they had an older brother Patrick, which just happened to be my little brother's name. I don't think, or my little brother's middle name, but I don't think that was intentional. But Patrick used to be mean to us. He'd be mean to me. And the other imaginary friends that I had, Bonnie and Carissa. And which is because I don't think I ever knew anybody named Bonnie or Carissa, but that was what my imaginary friends were called. And then yeah, Evil Patrick.
That is so weird.
I had no idea this was weird.
I don't think I ever actually had imaginary friends. At least I don't remember the portion of my life in which I would, but I don't remember a decent portion of my life before, like, mid to late teens,
And the
which I'm told is
trauma
not a good
fairy
thing.
goes bink and just
Yep.
removes those memories. Goes, "Oh, you don't need
Eh,
those. It's okay."
leaves more room for remembering Star Trek trivia and puns.
And passages from every book you've ever read, which is
Yes.
really fun making a podcast against you or with you when we're talking about the same book because I have pages of copious notes and I didn't know till like the third episode that you didn't have any notes. That you I take notes on the plot summary, like I stop and write stuff down, and then finally realized that you were just remembering all of it off the top of your head.
Well, I said several times, like, oh, I wish I'd taken notes, or oh, I should take notes for the next one.
Yeah.
Because I don't know. I remember it enough to talk about it, and I write down good lines. But yeah, no, I just kind of remember stuff. It sticks. As long as it's older than like 2 or 3 weeks, it sticks forever.
So your long-term memory is stronger than your short-term memory.
Yes.
Yeah.
My immediate working memory is pretty good. It can be really good if I need it to be. Um, my short-term memory is kind of crap,
Mhm.
which really does not help when you have like an ongoing list of things to do to like run a couple businesses and a household,
Mhm.
um, and a handful of medically complicated loved
Could
ones.
you hear that notification?
No.
Oh, good. Good. Um, yeah, yeah. I'm okay with stuff. I don't know. Stuff definitely skips my short-term memory and just implants itself in my long-term memory, and I don't know until later on I'm answering a Jeopardy question or something, and it's like, oh, I didn't even know that I knew that.
Yeah. Yeah,
Just
that's
kind of
always my
fun.
favorite one. Or people like, why do you know all this? Or how are you so smart? I'm like, I have no idea. I just show up and then there's information and it's there. Like,
Like, believe me, though, I would much rather have a sense of direction. Do not have. So,
well, my life is fairly directionless. Does that count? What do you want to do when you grow up? Or what do you want to be when you grow up? I don't know, happy,
Hey, that seems like the
content.
hardest thing to achieve. So I think that's an excellent goal because happy implies a lot of things. It implies alive and not destitute and, fed and housed and supported and, having perhaps loved ones around you and hobbies and, so happy. I think happy is a great one. I think that is something we should all strive for and for helping each other attain. It's right there in the Bill of Rights.
Yeah, the hormones help. Well, yeah, that's because it was going to be uh, the pursuit of property, but they were also explicitly preventing people from having property. So it had to be the pursuit of happiness. It's like, let's add something ethereal that people can't actually challenge us in court over.
I don't know. I know a lot of homeowners, and I don't necessarily feel like property ownership is key to happiness. Talk to
Oh,
somebody
not
after
that kind of
their
property. No, no.
talk talk to somebody after their water heater has burst, or they discover what a sump pump does, and I think people might argue that that is a necessary step in happiness.
Oh yeah, no. When I lived with my with my bio family, like shortly before you and I met, I spent a couple of years mostly just running their house. Like there was a lot of lawn, there was a lot of trees that had to be cut down, there was a couple of stumps that need to be pulled out, some electrical to be redone, some plumbing to be worked out. Like it's a job. Like
Mm-hmm.
having a house is a full-time job.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Yeah, I one of my favorite Instagram or TikTok creators is Mercury Stardust, and she has the account the Trans Handy Ma'am, and she is a delight. She's from Madison, Wisconsin, and so I feel like I know her just because I mean, somebody from Wisconsin, or if you have Wisconsin family, like you just know everybody from Wisconsin in some way.
mhm.
And she just bought a house. And so she does this for a living and has just bought a house and is chronicling her home ownership. And it's like, even for somebody who knows what they're doing and does this stuff all the time, it is challenging and exhausting. So I just,
And expensive.
ugh, ugh. Yeah, she was
Yeah.
just, the last one I saw, she was trying to hook up her internet, and she's like trying to follow all these cables, and they all been cut, and then she's like, and this cable goes to nothing, and this is just excess, and like the easiest task you'd think that she'd be able to accomplish, and it took an exorbitant amount of time. It was incredibly frustrating. That's like the one thing I watch where I was like, maybe I could sort of help in that project, and no, it just looked miserable.
Now there's in my library of saved TikTok audios to make something with. Uh, what I actually haven't saved because I have no use for it, but I love it every time it comes up, is somebody doing a video of inspecting wiring in a house and going, "So who helped you with your electrical wiring?" "Oh, that would be my son Jim. He's very handy around the thing." "And when did his house burn down?" "Oh, about 2 years ago. How'd you know?"
Yeah.
And it's someone like touching a screwdriver to a water pipe that's arcing. Like that's not supposed to happen.
See,
You're
but
not supposed to have spicy water.
it's so expensive to get, to have somebody come out and do it. People think they're saving money or need
Mm-hmm.
stuff done but don't have the money to pay for it, so you're just it's it's a little bit of gambling each and every time. But it is funny. I mean, I was at someone's house. I won't disclose who, but we were sitting at the kitchen table talking, and there was the distinct sound of water dripping in the wall. Like you could hear it clearly. And it wasn't remarked upon at all. And finally, I would say, I'm sorry, is that water dripping in the wall? Is that something that needs to be taken care of? And oh no, that's okay. It just does that. And it's like that is the face and expression of somebody who can't afford it and is just going on hope. They are just hoping that nothing happens while they live there or while they're alive. And just because they can't deal with it. They don't have the money, they don't have the know-how, so they're just going with it.
Yeah, yeah, no. No, water will cause an insane amount of damage in a very short amount of time. And if you let it sit, it's going to be an amazing amount of damage. So,
Yep.
anyways, I'm glad we live in an apartment.
Yeah, they just replaced our dishwasher for us. I mean, it's crappy. They didn't give us a good one, but at least it's functional and it's not me washing dishes.
Mm-hmm.
So there's benefits.
No, if we had to do dishes by hand, I don't think we ever would actually do dishes.
Paper plates.
Mm-hmm. Should we make a podcast?
Let's make a podcast.
Hello and welcome into another episode of Gifted Kid, Messy Adult, the show where potential went to die. I'm one of your hosts, Ellie Michaels. I use she, her.
I am your other host, Jessica Michaels. I use she, they.
How are we feeling today, Jess?
Going with the day. I don't feel particularly either way.
Day. Nice.
It's a day.
And today we are talking about unofficial terms for neurodivergence, specifically the term neurospicy. Where did we come across this that gave this idea?
This comes from Reddit, particularly the neurodiversity subreddit. And here is specifically what it says. Thoughts on the term neurospicy. I've seen this term around a few times. Personally, I think it's cute and don't mind it, but I've seen some people saying they really don't like it and think it's ableist. What are your thoughts? And so that is the question. And it caught my eye because I also have heard the term neurospicy more and more and more. And I don't know, it's an interesting name and topic, I think. When we say neurospicy, generally people are substituting that term for neurodivergent. So instead of I am neurodivergent, they'll say I am neurospicy. It does seem to represent, people across the neurodiversity categories. And so it's something that has crept up. You'll see in people's bios, and you will just hear in everyday conversation instead of neurodivergent.
Right. That's why I like it. I like it because it's an accessibility point, because being neurospicy is a medical condition. It's a neurodivergent itself is not necessarily a medical term, but autistic ASD1 or ADHD inattentive, like these are just medical terms, and they tend not to play well, in the sense that people have a hard time remembering and using complicated medical terms. So, I mean, it's a disingenuous argument, but it's the argument of like, oh, there's so many pronouns now. It's like, okay, there's like 8, but still, when you make something easier, when you make something more of a kind of fun, kind of slang term, I think it gets quicker acceptance, and it gets worked into the lexicon and therefore into the zeitgeist of any given population much easier than a specific medical term.
And I definitely think one of the things that you see highlighted in a lot of the responses to this particular question asker is that neurotypical people do seem to have latched onto it. And so it is something that, when you're talking about acceptance, when we talk about acceptance, we have to be okay with neurotypical people using the words that we have chosen. We can't gatekeep something and then say, oh, we want to be accepted. So people are debating, well, should neurotypicals be using the word neurospicy, either to describe other people or to maybe even try to connect with, maybe referring to themselves as neurospicy. But I do think, I could see why somebody would be challenged by somebody describing themselves as neurospicy if they don't have any neurodivergent condition or category or identity that would normally apply to them. But at the same time, because we wouldn't want somebody saying, oh, I'm autistic when they aren't autistic. But we do need people who are not neurodivergent to understand what it means to be ADHD and autistic and, these other things, or what it means to have a different brain. And part of that, I think, is having people be exposed to the language and the experience and things like that. So it's sort of a double-edged sword, right? We want people to know and understand, but we also maybe don't want them using these terms. And I think there's some inherent conflict there.
Yeah, it is a little infantilizing. It is a little dismissive of, you don't have an actual disability, you're just neurospicy. But at the same time, I think it feels to me like the term queer, that like, when I was growing up and I was a kid, that was more of like a slur, or it was, it was a word that Homer Simpson used once to describe something that was odd or out of place. And it's really been reclaimed by the queer community because, again, people complain about the LGBTQIA plus being too long, and like if honestly, if you have trouble with the acronyms or pronouns, you are going to lose your mind when you learn about names. There are so many names, everybody has their own, they're spelled different, people just make them up. It's I am sorry for you, but you're going to have to work on it. um but it's a nice umbrella term where, are you, plus you don't have to be so super explicit about your specific corner of this identity. You're just queer. You aren't necessarily, pan with a leading towards sapphic romantic and then, like eight other qualifiers in there. You're just queer.
I
Yeah.
am one of those people that would have that many qualifiers. So that's exactly the reason I go with queer, is because I really don't want to take everybody I meet through a detailed history of my relationships and entanglements. And then I came to this realization. So I just go with queer. And that
Mm-hmm.
does everything it needs to do, in my opinion. So I certainly understand that. I really like that comparison that you made using the word queer when it comes to neurodiversity, because I think as we're finding out, we found out that in addition to boys, girls had ADHD and there were girl autistics too. And these discoveries that we're making now tend to be towards, boy, oh boy, a lot of the people who have ADHD sure seem to have autistic tendencies and vice versa, which is interesting. So I think something like neurospicy, just like the word queer, gives a lot of latitude for people who are making those discoveries. Oh, I first got this label, but then over the years, as I've learned, I actually know I have this that applies to me as well. Or it gives some room for the science too to evolve, because I do think in 20, 50, 100 years, we're going to know a lot more than we do now about the way that these brains operate. And I doubt we'll be using the same terminology. So it covers a lot of ground, just like the word queer does. So I think that's an excellent, excellent comparison.
Thank you. That's why I said it. Also cute to think that in 2050 anybody will be talking about anything. I'd say there'd just be the sound of crickets, but they'll all be dead too.
It'll just be cockroaches that'll be very interested in talking about their ADHD tendencies.
Yeah, I think neurospicy is up there with, I mean, my particular favorite term is neuroqueer, just because in our work with neurodivergent adults, we're all freaking queer. Like it's the rule, not the exception. Like something like 70% of neurodivergent adults identify as some kind of gender queer. And those other 30%, I'm pretty sure, are just the kind of autistic where they don't even register gender as something that they experience. Where it's like, I am an amorphous blob. I don't know what to tell you. Like, I wear the clothing that is comfortable and I go in the bathroom that won't get me yelled at. Other than that, I don't care. Your social
I
constructs are made up.
I can't wait to see some better science on the overlapping of those two populations and then to see it broken down, because I would bet that there's a statistically high percentage of autistics that are ace, and I bet
Mm-hmm.
there's a significantly high perspective or percentage of autistics that are trans. And so right now, I mean, I think the best that we can get is, you're right. I think that study that you're referring to was specifically on autistics and like one group of autistics. If I'm recalling correctly, I might not be. If I'm not, feel free to email us and let me know if I am quoting this incorrectly. But I think that study was referring to autistics. I would love to see a broader examination of the queer population and the neurodivergent population, because I think you're exactly right. It does seem like, I think we were on a call the other day and the majority of the group were actually trans, and then
Mm-hmm.
non-binary, and we had one cisgender person. And that was our crew, that was our group. And I think that's, don't know how many spaces you can get into where cisgender is the minority.
And to be honest, I would bet dollars to Betsy that if we sat down and talked to that one cis person and slowly pushed some ideas and questions about how they experience and perceive gender that they maybe haven't actually thought about or really confronted, within about a half an hour, there would be some deer in the headlights and, oh, is that what that is? Kind of conversations.
Not that we're trying to, we certainly don't have an agenda. We're not trying to push queerness on people, you
I
know.
am.
I mean, I'm gonna get us in
Gender is
trouble.
stupid. Why do you believe what other people tell you about your gender? It's yours. You get to examine it and figure it out.
That is true.
Silly.
If there's a couple things people can't reliably tell you or argue with you about, and one is how you feel, and gender should certainly be in that space also, because it is about how you feel. So, you know,
And so should neurotypicality. I mean, of course, yes, do not self-diagnose based on absolutely nothing, but if you feel that you fit better into a non-standard neurotype, you probably are.
mhm. Could the term neurospicy be used to describe somebody who maybe has a few neurodivergent traits, but maybe isn't technically somebody who has a diagnosable neurodivergent condition?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think, and to me, that's good. Do you think that's good, or do you think that's bad?
No, I think that's good because I think that first of all, just the idea of neurospicy is almost like a desirable word. Like you're not neuro mayonnaise, you're not neuro bland, you're neurospicy. You're fun. You got something interesting about yourself. And most people have something fun and interesting about themselves. And being able to include that, I think, helps people empathize with people who have a stronger or more day-to-day affecting neurospicy traits.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
you can get into the everybody's little ADHD thing, and that can be bad and that can be dismissive. But it's also good to have people empathize and understand that not everybody's exactly the same, but at the same time, you have shared experiences with these people who would otherwise not be terribly like you in your mind.
And if we want the world to accept and adapt, that's much easier to do when our numbers are larger, right?
Uh-huh.
It is much easier to advocate for change when a change will impact a much larger group of people. And so I see it as, because I do a lot of work in the workplace and in the corporate world, that's immediately a question I have to answer, and that other people who do similar work has to answer, which is, well, how many people are we talking about? How many people is this going to impact? And it's much easier when you have something that a lot of people identify with, because that's going to make then a demonstrable impact on that you can see on a balance sheet, right? That you can see on a P&L. When it's something that is such a small percentage of people that the CEO has never heard anybody use the word neurodivergent, then it's more difficult for me to come in and make the argument that you need to give resources to support neurodiversity because they don't perceive it as a problem. But if suddenly the CEO says, hey, my kids are describing themselves as neurospicy, and I've heard, neurospicy here, like, what is this? Then it really allows an opening for me to get in and say, actually, what this refers to is this, and it affects, this much of your working population approximately. It just gives me, what's the word? Not a much broader opportunity to educate and jump in and actually make demonstrable change and make a difference. And I think you're right when you said people aren't necessarily going to remember the clinical words, but they
Mhm.
might remember a term that seems more colloquial, like neurospicy. I think the opposite argument, and some of the people in this Reddit thread do make the argument, is that though when people that are neurotypical use the word, it's annoying and upsetting because they much prefer that it be a word that only we use only to describe ourselves. And that I think the ableism part, I want to make sure we highlight that, that ableism comes into play because, well, if everybody is neurospicy, then you shouldn't have a problem dealing with life, or we shouldn't have to adapt because everybody's neurospicy and everybody's just fine. And so if we spread the definition too thin, then we don't get the things that we need. And that's where the ableism, I think, the ableism argument comes in. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Not really.
I do think, I can see, we've talked about people who say, oh, everybody's a little ADHD, everybody's a little autistic. And I think for me, the ableism argument kind of comes from that vein, is, well, no, everybody's not autistic, a little autistic, everybody's not a little ADHD. So is everybody not a little neurospicy? Is that the same thing? Because if we make neurospicy the norm, then we shouldn't need anything to change because everybody has to deal with things.
I actually think oh, everybody's little ADHD is a hilariously weak argument that with a few seconds of thought, you can turn around and destroy. So, oh, everybody's little ADHD, everybody loses their keys. Great. Okay. Everybody loses their keys from time to time. I want you to imagine that you've spent the last 20 years of your life spending a significant portion of your time, energy, and effort not losing your keys. And yet, every 4 months, no matter what you do, no matter what systems you would put in place or how you change your behavior, your keys just vanish. You have been fired 6 times in your life because you keep losing your keys to the point where you are habitually late for work because of this one phenomenon. You lost $3,000 over the last 5 years having to replace your car key. Do you think that is something that everybody faces? Or do you think that there's a very sliding scale of how much that affects everybody? That's like saying everybody has one leg a little bit shorter than the other. Okay, well, some people have a leg that's 8 inches shorter. And that takes a good deal more effort, accommodation, and it affects their day to day lives a whole lot more. So the whole, oh, everybody's a little blah, blah, blah argument to me just strikes as something that, okay, great. You have an idea. I have an in into your thinking, and now I can break that open
You're
through
on
just a
fire
little bit.
today. You're on fire with your comparisons today. The idea of everybody's legs are not quite the same length. Everybody has one leg shorter than the other. I think is really good. I'm going to steal that next time I speak because everybody has two legs. What are the chances that those legs are exactly the same length?
Zero.
In in most people, one is going to be longer than the other. But is it a millimeter? Is it a millimeter? It might be so close that you don't even notice. But for some people, that's an 8-inch difference. And so I think that's a really good comparison in the way brains work also is for some people, sure, but that difference is so small and so that it doesn't impact anything. But for some people, that difference is massive and it affects every single thing that they do. So I'm gonna credit you. I'm gonna credit you for sure, but I'm stealing it. Absolutely.
I mean, steal away. I'm not going to remember that I said that in about an hour.
See, back to the short-term memory, but then it'll implant in your long-term memory. And years later, you're going to be hearing me say that in a speech, and you're going to go, I give you that example.
Yeah. I don't know, but that's also just one of the things that my brain does is someone's like, well, here's a facetious argument. And I go, okay, well, I can dismantle that in these 6 ways. Where should I start? Because I see your
Autistic, you
argument and I
say
understand your, yeah, yeah, a little bit.
patterns, pattern recognition and analysis. Yeah, but back to Neurospicy. I think, honestly, to me, when I am describing to people what I do, the number one challenge I have is educating people as to what it is. I think for people who are neurodivergent, who are in neurodivergent communities, and who seek out other people that are neurodivergent, we have this sense of how well neurodiversity is talked about and known that is skewed compared to the greater population. The vast majority of people, I promise you, do not have any idea what neurodiversity is, what neurodivergent is. That is the chief argument, that I have to go up against when I am trying to coach or trying to get businesses to make some changes is I don't know what you're talking about. I've never heard of this before. I've never heard of it before, so it can't really be a problem. I've never heard of it before, so it's not real. So to me, anything that gets the word out about neurodiversity is good and is better than it just staying within our community because at least that gets more people into the space where they can ask questions. And that makes my job, which is actually getting in and making changes, much, much easier. But right now, just even educating people that they have an issue is something that's really tough to do. So if there's language that we can use that helps more people tap into this topic, I think it is to the benefit of the whole grouping for sure.
And on a personal note, the fact that it's a new term and it's not a twisting of an existing term or word that has a definition makes me very happy. Because every time I hear someone talk about how the storm decimated the local turtle population, I'm like, oh, it reduced it by 10%? Because that's what that word means. It like deci as in like decibel as in like 1/10, right? That's what we're talking about. Oh, you meant devastate. Okay, yeah, no. So when we come up with a new term like neurospicy, I'm like, oh, that doesn't actually mean anything yet. We can say that it means this. Hooray.
Language changes, and I have come to accept that begrudgingly. I
Yeah,
I,
me too.
I definitely don't want to be a prescriptivist for sure. I don't want it in my constitutional law, and I don't want it, in general. But boy, oh boy, oh boy, some areas of that are easier to deal with than others. So I applaud your efforts in accepting the new definition of decimate. But my heart does tug a little bit for you every time I hear it because I know it's a battle.
I just, people don't know what it means. They're trying to say devastate. It's like when they say something is horrid, it's like, no, it's horrible. But moving on. Moving on. Not
What
important.
about nauseous versus nausea or nauseated? People say I'm nauseous. What they really mean is I'm nauseated.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, the boat has moved. I would rather be on it than behind it. So, all right, I'm nauseous. Hearing the word decimated makes me nauseous.
English isn't a real language anyway. We've made half of it up by now. And
So
that's part of what
neurospicy,
I love about it.
neurospicy can jump right in there with the rest of them. I'm okay
Exactly.
with it. I'm okay with it.
The English language doesn't so much borrow from other languages as it does follow those languages down dark alleyways, knock them out, and go through their pockets for spare grammar. Not a Pratchett line. Can't remember who it was, but I'll put it in the notes because it's my friend's friend.
Mm.
It's an actual thing.
And as always, people can delightfully and politely point out to us when we are wrong or where we may find some additional citations by emailing us. We certainly love when people reach out. And where can they do that, Els? What's the email address again?
Well, you can find us at giftedkidmessyadult@gmail.com. And in fact, if you like our show and would like to support us, could you please subscribe, rate, and review us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts? You can also subscribe and rate us on YouTube at Gifted Kid Messy Adult. If you'd like to support us financially, you can find us on Patreon at the Neurodiverse Workplace, where subscribers get access to all kinds of bonus content, curated mean behind the scenes shenanigans, voting for future topics, and you can help us keep the lights on and provide neurotype affirming care and resources for our fellow neurospicy individuals. If you'd like to suggest a future topic or just say nice things and give us that sweet, sweet external validation, please email us your thoughts, questions, or praise to giftedkidmessyadult@gmail.com. Jess, where can people find more about you?
People can find me at coachjessicamichaels.com. Information about coaching services, classes, free resources will be there. You can also find us on GoFundMe. If you would like to help join in the fight against the medical establishment and the fight to keep my dear, lovely Ellie alive, please go and GoFundMe. We'll put the link in the show notes, and you can also go to GoFundMe and just search Jessica or Ellie Michaels.
I am held together by the medical equivalent of duct tape, spit, and spite. And if you'd like to find me, you can find me at elliemichaelsproductions.com, where we can do some customized commercial video production just for you. And until next time, take care of each other out there.
Bye.